Chapter 1 of Billionaire Boy by David Walliams, narrated by me. Chapter 1. Meet Joe Spud. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have £1 million? Or $1 billion? How about $1 trillion? Or even $1 gazillion? Meet Joe Spud. Joe didn't have to imagine what it would be like to have loads and loads and loads of money. He was only 12, but he was ridiculously, preposterously rich. Joe had everything he could ever want. 100-inch plasma widescreen, flat screen, high-definition TV in every room in the house, 500 pairs of Nike trainers, a grand prick race track in the back garden, a robot dog from Japan, a golf buggy with the number plate Spud 2 to drive around the grounds of his house, a water slide which went from his bedroom into an indoor Olympic-sized swimming pool, every computer game in the world, 3D IMAX cinema in the basement, a crocodile, 24-hour personal masseuse, underground 10-lane bowling alley, snooker table, popcorn dispenser, skateboard park, another crocodile, £100,000 a week pocket money, roller coaster in the back garden, a professional recording studio in the attic, personalised football coaching from the England team, real-life shark in a tank. In short, Joe was one horribly spoilt kid. He went to a ridiculously posh school. He flew on private planes wherever he went on holiday. Once he even had Disney World closed for the day, just so he didn't have to queue for any rides. Here's Joe, speeding around his own private racetrack in his Formula One racing car. Some very rich children have miniature versions of cars, specially built for them. Joe wasn't one of those children. Joe needed his Formula One car made a bit bigger. He was quite fat, you see. Well, you would be, would you? If you could buy all the chocolate in the world. You will have noticed that Joe is on his own in that picture. To tell the truth, speeding around on a racetrack isn't that much fun when you're on your own. Even if you do have a squillion pounds, you still have someone to race against. The problem was, Joe didn't have any friends. Not one. Now, driving a Formula One car and unwrapping a king-size Mars bar are two things you shouldn't try to do at the same time. But there's been a few moments since Joe had last eaten, and he was hungry. As he entered the chicane, he tore open the wrapper with his teeth and took a bite of this delicious chocolate-coated nougat and caramel. Unfortunately, Joe only had one hand on the steering wheel, and as the wheels of the car hit the verge, he lost control. The multi-million-pound Formula One car carried off the track, span round and hit a tree. Scratch! The tree was unharmed, but the car was a write-off. Joe squeezed himself out the cockpit. Luckily, Joe wasn't hurt, but he was a little dazed, and he tottered back to the house. "Dad, I crashed the car," said Joe as he entered the palatial living room. Mr. Spud was short and fat, just like his son, hairy in a lot of places too, apart from his head, which was bold and shiny. Joe's dad was sitting on the 100-seater crocodile skin sofa and didn't look up from reading the day's copy of The Sun. "Don't worry, Joe," he said. "I'll buy you another one." Joe slumped down on the sofa next to his dad. "Oh, happy birthday, by the way, Joe." Mr. Spud handed an envelope to his son, without taking his eyes off the girl on page 3. Joe opened the envelope eagerly. How much money was he going to receive this year? The card read, "Happy 12th birthday, son," was quickly discarded in favour of the cheque inside. Joe could barely disguise his disappointment. £1 million? Is that all? "What's the matter, son?" Mr. Spud put down his newspaper for a moment. "You gave me £1 million last year," whined Joe, "when I turned 11. Surely I should get more now I'm 12. Mr. Spud reached into the pocket of his shiny grey designer suit and pulled over his checkbook. His suit was horrible and horribly expensive. "Oh, I'm so sorry, son," he said. "Let's make it $2 million. Now, it's important you realise that Mr. Spud had not always been this rich. Not so long ago, the Spud family had lived a very humble life. From the age of 16, Mr. Spud worked in a vast loo roll factory on the outskirts of town. Mr. Spud's job at the factory was so boring. He had to roll the paper around the cardboard in a tube. Roll after roll, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. This he did over and over again, until nearly all his hope had gone. He would stand all day by the conveyor belt with hundreds of other bored workers, repeating the same mind-numbing tasks. Every day the paper was rolled onto the cardboard tube, the whole thing started again, and every loo roll was the same. Because his family was so poor, Mr. Spud used to make birthday and Christmas presents for his son from the loo roll in the tubes. Mr. Spud never had enough money to buy Joe all the latest toys, but he would make him something like a loo roll racing car or a loo roll fort complete with a dozen of loo roll soldiers. Most of them got broken and ended up in the bin. Joe did manage to save a sad-looking little loo roll space rocket, though he wasn't sure why. The only good thing about working in the factory was that Mr. Spud had lots of time to daydream. One day he had a daydream that was to revolutionise bottom wiping forever. Why not invent a loo roll that is moist on one side and dry on the other, he thought, and he rolled paper around his 1000th roll of the day. Mr. Spud kept the idea top secret and toiled for hours locked in the bathroom of their little council flat, getting his double-sided loo roll exactly right. When Mr. Spud finally launched Bumfresh, it was an instant phenomenon. Mr. Spud sold 1 billion rolls around the world every day, and every time a roll was sold, he made 10 pence. It all added up to an awful lot of money, as this simple maths equation shows. 10 pence times 1 million rolls, 1 million billion rolls, times by 365 days a year equals a lot of wonga. Joe Spud was only 8 at the time. Bunfresh was launched, and his life was turned upside down in a heartbeat. First, Joe's mum and dad split up. It turned out that for many years, Joe's mum, Carol, had been having a torrid affair with Joe's scub Scout leader, Alan. She took a £10 billion divorce settlement. Alan swapped his canoe for a gigantic yacht. Last anyone had heard, Carol and Alan were sailing off the coast of Dubai, pouring vintage champagne on their crunchy nut cornflakes every morning. Joe's dad seemed to get over the split quickly and began going on dates with an endless parade of page 3 girls. Soon, father and son moved out of their poky council flat and into an enormously stately home. Mr. Spud named it Bumfresh Towers. The house was so large it was visible from outer space. It took 5 minutes just to motor up the drive. Hundreds of newly planted, hopeful little trees lined the mile-long gravel track. The house had 7 kitchens, 12 sitting rooms, 47 bedrooms and 89 bathrooms. Even the bathrooms had ensuite bathrooms. And some of those ensuite bathrooms had ensuite bathrooms. Despite living there for a few years, Joe had probably only explored around a quarter of the main house. In the endless grounds were tennis courts, a boating lake, a helipad, and even a 100-metre ski slope, complete with mountains of fake snow. All the taps, door handles, and even toilet seats were solid gold. The carpets were made from mink fur. He and his dad drank orange squash from priceless antique medieval goblets. And for a while they had a butler called Otis, who was also an orangutan. But he had to be given the sack. "Can I have a proper present as well, Dad?" said Joe, and he put his cheque in the trouser pocket. "I mean, I've got loads of money already." "Tell me what you want, sir, and I'll get one of my assistants to buy it," said Mr. Spud. "Some solid gold sunglasses? I've got a pair. Can't see out of them, but they are very expensive." Joe yawned. "Your own speedboat?" ventured Mr. Spud. Joe rolled his eyes. "I've got 2 of those, remember? Sorry, son. How about £250,000 worth of W.H. Smith vouchers?" "Boring, boring, boring." Joe stamped his feet in frustration. Here was a boy with a high-class problem. Mr. Spud looked forlorn. He wasn't sure there was anything left in the world he could buy his only child. "Then what, son?" Joe suddenly had a thought. He pictured himself going round the racetrack all on his own, racing against himself. "Well, there is something I really want," he said, tentatively. "Name it, son," said Mr. Spud. "A friend." That's the end of these chapters, folks. If you enjoyed, please do not forget to like and subscribe. And comment down below which book I should read after this one. See you guys in the next chapters. Bye-bye.